Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mighty Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing the reading of Thousand Autumns Volume 4, also known as Qianqiu by Meng Xi Shi. We're covering chapters 90 through 93, so I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 90, Heartfelt Sincerity. Shen Chao wasn't a good liar, so he vacillated a while between the replies yes and no before finally shaking his head. But this momentary pause was enough for Yan Wushi to know his real answer. Taoist Master Shen, he said, there is one matter that puzzles this venerable one. He asks for enlightenment. Please, go ahead. Shen Chao had never heard him speak in such a grave and serious tone. For a moment, he was almost terrified. Buddhism asserts that monks must not lie. Does Taoism have a similar teaching? Shen Chao didn't understand what he was getting at, and he began pondering the question earnestly. Taoism doesn't have restrictions as severe as those of Buddhism, but whether it's the three schools or just the average person, being truthful is a virtue for anyone with moral integrity. Then why did you shake your head when you were clearly worried about this venerable one? Yan Wushi asked curiously. Does this not violate your principles? Taoist Master Shen, it seems you've learned all sorts of cunning after spending so long in the secular society. If this continues, I fear that you'll soon be an expert at swindling and cheating others even. He was messing with Shen Chao. Seeing that he refused to respond, Yan Wushi knew he'd successfully ruffled Shen Chao's feathers with his teasing. Finally satisfied enough to move on to proper topics, he said, Yuan Xian was the only descendant of the Zhou dynasty qualified to inherit Yuan Yong's mantle. If he became emperor, the Zhou dynasty would have flourished for another 20 years. Unfortunately, Yuan Yong was too short-sighted and didn't heed that advice. He insisted on passing the throne to his son and brought about the situation today. The father passes it to his son, and the son to the grandson, said Shen Chao. This is the cycle anyone with descendants inevitably falls into. If we take a look at history, any emperor with sons never considered passing it to his brother, no matter how talented or virtuous he was. Yan Wushi sneered. I used to think that Yuan Yong was the exception, but it seems I overestimated him. With his unwillingness to pass the throne to Yuan Xian, and Yuan Xian's reluctance to scheme for it, the current situation makes complete sense. All it means is that Yuan clan's legacy will end here. With Yuan Yun, the Zhou dynasty has passed its peak and will inevitably begin to wane. Shen Chao nodded. Since that's the case, you must have predicted this situation long beforehand and made your preparations in advance. No wonder the manor within the capital was already deserted when I arrived. He didn't mind that Yan Wushi had held information from him. Instead, he was happy that there hadn't been more losses. Because Bian Yanmei followed my orders and withdrew early. All that's left for Yuan Yun and Xueting now are a couple of abandoned estates, said Yan Wushi. It wasn't worth mentioning. You were able to leave the capital safely and without trouble because he contacted his old acquaintances in the imperial court who secretly provided assistance. Yuan Yun was determined to eradicate Yuan Xian's entire family, and Yuan Song was a fish that escaped his net. The most dangerous part of Shen Chao and Yuan Song's journey had been when they were just leaving the capital. The farther they got from Chang'an, the safer things became. Because by that time Yuan Yuan had realized that his fish had slipped out into the vast oceans, it'd be too difficult to chase them down. Shen Chao was no fool. After pondering to himself a moment, he understood what Yan Wushi was implying. So you have no more hopes for the Yuan family? Then you must have already chosen a new candidate for emperor? Yan Wushi laughed. Why didn't you guess that this venerable one would want that position for himself? Shen Chao shook his head. You wouldn't. His reply was so decisive, even Yan Wushi couldn't resist probing him curiously. Why not? Shen Chao thought to himself. You might be mercurial and egotistical, but if you wish to become emperor, you would have already unified the three demonic sects and infiltrated northern Zhou, then found an opportunity to usurp the throne. Why would you have fooled around until you burned even yourself and ended up being ambushed by Xueting and the others? It was obvious that you were only acting on your whims. Even the throne means little to you. However, if he said this aloud, Yan Wushi would certainly mock him endlessly. So he offhandedly said, Take a guess. Yan Wushi didn't reply. It was rare for Shen Chao to leave Yan Wushi awkward and speechless. He couldn't help but smile, inordinately pleased. Not a sound accompanied this smile. It came whisper silent. When Yan Wushi saw it, the upward curve of his own lips slowly faded. This man was far too tender-hearted, and he'd only remember kindness, not enmity. A thought suddenly surfaced within Yan Wushi's mind. If the one who'd found Shen Chao beneath Bamboo Peak hadn't been Yan Wushi, but Sang Jingxing or Duen Wenyang, what would have happened to him? Yan Wushi didn't believe that it was human nature to be kind. In the past, with the goal of toying with this man's heart, he tested him again and again for the single purpose of unearthing the darkest parts of Shen Chao's personality. But even after all he'd been through, with his martial arts destroyed, on the brink of losing everything and forced to start over, Shen Chao had never changed. It was as if, no matter how many trials were forced upon him, they would never crush him. No, there were still some changes. At the very least, he now knew how to judge the best course of action, and his understanding of people and situations had sharpened. Or perhaps you could say that those various trials had been no more than a whetstone to Shen Chao. They'd slowly ground away all the rock concealing the lovely jade within, and now it blossomed to its full glory. And this lovely jade was none other than Shen Chao's Taoist core. Even after thousands of timberings, his Taoist core had remained the same. Shen Chao noticed Yan Wushi had stopped walking, and that the man was looking at him contemplatively. Confused, he asked, "What is it?" "Nothing," said Yan Wushi. "Just now, I finally understood something." Said Shen Chao. Yan Wushi smiled, but didn't speak. Before, he loathed Xie Ling's influence, thinking that those thoughts weren't his own. He tried to suppress that strange feeling numerous times, and he'd believed that the moment he repaired the flaw in the demonic core, that feeling would vanish with it. He hadn't expected that Shen Chao's smile would reawaken everything. He was unwilling to admit that he, who looked down upon everyone in the world, would one day find that a name had wormed its way into his heart. Human hearts were filled with malice. Some people were traitors, turning their backs on all integrity. Some were ingrates, repaying kindness with enmity. There were those who'd abandoned their spouses, who were willing to do anything for wealth and glory. Yan Wushi had seen many, and he thought nothing of them because he too was a selfish, callous human. He only categorized things based on whether they deserved his notice, and to him, there were no actions that fell beyond a line that could not be crossed. However, now Yan Wushi was forced to admit that Shen Chao was unique and that he couldn't change him. Though the world was vast, there was only one Shen Chao. "My venerable self suddenly thought of something amusing," he said. "Would you like to listen?" "No," said Shen Chao. Yan Wushi turned a deaf ear and started talking anyway. "Once upon a time, there was a man who found a stone in a heap of gold and jewels." Shen Chao's mouth twitched. Didn't he just say he didn't want to listen? But he couldn't believe that it was only an ordinary stone. He thought that since it'd been piled together with the mass of treasures in that room, it must also be a treasure. So he brought it everywhere with him, and even had it examined and polished by many. But every single person, without exception, told him that it was only an ordinary stone, that there was nothing special about it. Guess what happened in the end? Shen Chao's face was both lost and bewildered. In the end, he finally believed that it was indeed a worthless stone. But in his eyes, compared to the room full of gold and silver treasure, even if it was only a stone, it was still one of a kind, a stone out of a million. Shen Chao was silent. Why did this story sound so bizarre? It was indeed unusual to hear such a normal story from such an abnormal person. He couldn't help but say, "Even thousands of gold pieces cannot purchase happiness. Some people care little for wealth. They only wish to seek out things that other people find worthless. In my opinion, that man already liked the stone more than the other jewels and treasures, but he was trapped by his misconceptions and unwilling to admit it." Yan Wushi laughed. "That's true. You're very correct. Thousands of gold pieces cannot purchase happiness. There seemed to be a deep significance within these words. Why did Sekliruyen suddenly start telling me a story? Does it have something to do with the Yuan clan? Not at all, said Yen Wushi. This venerable one was bored and wanted to tease you, that's all. Shenqiao said nothing. He truly regretted his actions somewhat. He should have just let Yen Wushi ramble on by himself. Why had he replied to him in good faith? Enough time had passed during their conversation for the two of them to walk from the Huang residence all the way back to the inn. It was still the wee hours of the night, so the inn's gates were naturally closed. And Shenqiao returned to his room from that same window he'd left by. Only when he saw Yuan Song still slumbering away did he finally relax. Yen Wushi followed him. He laid eyes on Yuan Song upon the bed and made a surprised noise. This is my first time seeing him. Looking at the boy now, he indeed possesses an incredible talent for martial arts. His physical bases are spectacular. Yen Wushi's standards were immensely high. For him to say, his physical bases are spectacular, was incredible praise. Shenqiao smiled. Yes, he's indeed a promising youth. If he turns his energies to the martial path, he will definitely achieve great things in the future. Yen Wushi tapped Yuan Song's gate of sleep, and the child fell into an even deeper slumber. Like this, their conversation would not wake him. It's enough that you know that Yuan Fuyi has been in secret contact with the Huang family, he said. You need not concern yourself with it any further. Shenqiao frowned. The Huang family have dealings with the Gokturks. This means that the Liuhe Guild are also involved. Since Douyan Shan was willing to ally with Duen Wenyang to attack you, they must have been in contact for a while. That's a separate matter, said Yen Wushi. Whether it's news by land or water, the Liuhe Guild controls most of it through cargo, escort, and boat travel. The south is full of waterways, besides, so the Liuhe Guild has always been close to the Chun dynasty. Unless there are mutual benefits, like when they joined hands to take care of me, Douyan Shan would never agree to work with the Gokturks. Shenqiao understood. So you're saying that there's discord between Yuan Fuyi and Douyan Shan? Yen Wushi made a sound of agreement. Ever since Yuan Fuyi lost the Juyang strategy scroll to me back at Chuyuan Temple, Douyan Shan has been dissatisfied with her. Yuan Fuyi has noticed, and she's unwilling to be reduced to a figurehead. The two of them have been fighting in secret inside the guild. After all, Yuan Fuyi is only the deputy leader. Not many people would be willing to leave with her, so she naturally needs to secure outside support. So that's why she went to the Huang family, said Shenqiao. She wishes for their help in wresting power from Douyan Shan, and through them, she also must have spoken to the Gokturks, promising her allegiance, cooperation, and a share of benefits, like things like that. Correct, said Yen Wushi. I too share a grudge with Douyan Shan. Now I can sit on the mountainside and watch the tigers battle. I'll let Yuan Fuyi realize her wish. She wants to become guild leader, but even if the Gokturks support her in secret, she still needs to eliminate the guild members who are loyal to Douyan Shan. Once she takes the leader seat, the Liuhe Guild will suffer from a shortage of manpower. There won't be enough new talent to take on the work. When that time comes, I'll give them another push. I trust that there are many people who'd leap at the chance to carve up the Liuhe Guild's authority like they would a melon. They'll collapse like a house of cards, all without me lifting a finger. Isn't that wonderful? But once they achieve their goals, the Gokturks might also choose to get rid of Yuan Fuyi and expropriate the wealth the Liuhe Guild has accumulated over the years, Shenqiao pointed out. Indeed, said Yen Wushi. It'll depend on the methods each side employs. Shenqiao felt a little helpless. Since Guangling-san also knows you don't have amnesia, why did you pretend in front of him earlier during the day? First, my venerable self doesn't want Guangling-san to know that we're close, Yen Wushi replied leisurely. This is to keep you safe, so you should thank me. How are you and I close? Shenqiao thought to himself, but he played along. I'm grateful for Sekliruyen's care. What's the second? The second reason, said Yen Wushi, was naturally to see your dumbfounded, disbelieving, and utterly lost expression. It was quite entertaining, wasn't it? Shenqiao didn't respond. I'm sorry. Okay. Chapter 91. Playing Weiqi. Yuan Song hadn't thought that he'd wake to another person in the room. He even thought that he must still be half asleep. He blinked several times, then rubbed his eyes, unable to help himself. Only then did he tentatively ask, Sect Leader Yan? This entire trip, he behaved himself like a miniature adult, and it was rare for him to do something so childish. Shen Chao was secretly amused and said gently, I trust that you know this man. He's indeed Huanyue Sect Leader Yan. You should greet him properly. Yuan Song cupped his hands and bowed. This junior Yuan Song greets Sect Leader Yan. Yan Wushi made a sound of acknowledgement, which was already quite obliging coming from him. No need for courtesies, he said. We last met 2 years ago, but a glance from me is enough to see that you've grown quite a bit. I'm grateful to Sect Leader Yan for his praise, said Yuan Song. In that case, would you like to apprentice under my venerable self? Said Yan Wushi. Shen Chao stared at him. Yuan Song was dumbfounded. Huh? A faint sullenness came over Shen Chao's face. How unkind of you, Sect Leader Yan. When did you sing to the point of stealing someone else's disciples? Yan Wushi gave a leisurely smile. Look at his reaction. He didn't immediately refuse. In fact, he even hesitated after hearing this suggestion of mine. It's obvious he'd rather be this venerable one's disciple than yours. Yuan Song rushed to declare his loyalty. I'm grateful for Sect Leader Yan's favor, but this junior has already told Taoist Master Shen that he'd follow the Taoist discipline. The word of an upright gentleman is no different from a swift horse. Once spoken, it cannot be reined in. I beg Sect Leader Yan's understanding. Yan Wushi raised an eyebrow. What's so great about being his disciple? You can't do this. You have to cherish that. If you apprentice under my venerable self, your two Shishong will both be over 20 years your senior. So in the future, my venerable self might even be able to pass you the position of sect leader. Huanyue sect is wealthy, and no matter what happens, you won't be required to wear a Taoist robe all year round. Looking at things that way, aren't there plenty of perks? Shen Chao was angry. Could Sect Leader Yan have followed this humble Taoist just to steal my disciple? If there was no demand for him, there'd be evidence of his inadequacy. Me trying to steal him from you proves that you have a good eye for disciples, so you should be thanking my venerable self. Shen Chao finally understood. Yan Wushi could twist each and every reasoning under the heavens to justify himself if he so wished. Yuan Song silently rubbed his forehead. He couldn't stand seeing Shen Chao in this speechless state and leapt to help his future Shitsun out of this quandary. Attempting to draw Yan Wushi's attention back to himself, he said, Taoist Master Shen and I intend to head to Bixia sect. May I inquire as to Sect Leader Yan's plans? Very well, said Yan Wushi. Huh? Didn't you just invite this venerable one to Bixia sect as a guest? Said Yan Wushi, completely composed. This venerable one accepts. Yuan Song was dumbfounded. Wait, that's not what I meant, he cried in his heart. He couldn't resist pleading for Shen Chao's help. Sect Leader Yan, Shen Chao said quickly. Bixia sect is currently on the wane. It's no longer of high status. I fear that it's unworthy of your regard. Ah, said Yan Wushi. No matter, this venerable one does not mind. The corner of Shen Chao's mouth twitched. But I am not a Bixia sect disciple. When under the roofs of others, we shouldn't overstep. No matter, said Yan Wushi. Once they see my venerable self, I'm sure they dare not refuse me. Shen Chao was speechless for a moment. Finally, he couldn't take it and said, This Taoist master is puzzled greatly over something. Bixia sect and Huanyue sect have no relation, and the former one is on the decline, so it has no benefits to offer Huanyue sect. So why does Sect Leader Yan insist on going? Naturally, it's for you, said Yan Wushi. Why else would my venerable self grace that tiny sect with my presence? And once they see me, how could they dare refuse? They'll be falling over themselves to welcome me. It was truly impossible to continue this conversation any longer. Shen Chao was about to spit blood in rage. It was like Yan Wushi was acting oblivious and perplexed on purpose. What he understood even less was Yan Wushi's subtle shift in attitude after some time apart. The more he ruminated on this, the more it disturbed him. After a long period of silence, he could only force out a single sentence. What if I refuse to let Sect Leader Yan come along? Yan Wushi was astonished. Just now, you said you had no right to decide anything. So what does your permission matter? Why are you being so unreasonable, Taoist Master Shun? Shun Xiao gave up. Yuan Song gazed at his future Shitsuan, his eyes full of sympathy. Then Yan Wushi suddenly turned to him. Do you really not want to be this venerable one's disciple? Caught off guard, Yuan Song shook his head back and forth like a rattledrum. Yan Wushi didn't say anything. He only gave a faint smile, as gentle as water. But with this smile, a shiver traveled through Yuan Song's body. And just like that, the traveling party of 2 grew to 3. When faced with someone who didn't understand no, who couldn't be chased off, and who Shun Chao probably couldn't even fight off, he could only choose to ignore him. However, Yan Wushi's entire existence was, intrinsically, quite difficult to ignore. As the 3 walked together, his face, so handsome it bordered on supernatural, would instantly draw the notice of others. For example, when they were staying at inns or enjoying meals, practically every concierge considered them a group and assumed that Yan Wushi would be paying the bills and calling the shots, so they all rushed toward him. Shun Xiao made many fruitless attempts to correct them, which left him physically and mentally exhausted, like right now. The 3 of them had already arrived at the foot of Mount Tai. The sky was dark, so they planned on staying beneath the mountain for the night before making the climb. It was the best season for sightseeing trips on Mount Tai. The inns at the foot of the mountain were usually full, and it was clear the innkeeper hadn't expected guests to arrive at such a late hour. He quickly came out personally to greet them, then had the concierge serve them enough hot food to fill the table. Smiling apologetically, he said, I'm truly very sorry. These days, there have been a great many guests who wish to sightsee, so we only have 1 room left. Will that be acceptable? Yan Wushi sent Shun Chao a glance. Shun Chao had already given up on correcting others who assumed they were traveling together. He didn't speak, but let Yan Wushi respond instead. Faint amusement flashed through Yan Wushi's eyes. He leisurely replied, That works. How large is the room? Not that big, said the innkeeper with a laugh. There's only an inner section and an outer section, but it's elegantly furnished. Once your esteemed self sees it, I guarantee your satisfaction. There is no inn in the surrounding 10 miles that's comparable to ours. Yan Wushi nodded. Then bring us a Weiqi set. At this time of year, most of the sightseers were literati. To cater to their preferences, the inn had made some preparations, so the innkeeper smiled and said, Yes, yes. He also threw in some flattery. My lowly self assumed that the 3 gentlemen were men who wandered the Jianghu. Never did I expect such intellectual hobbies. Masters of both pen and sword, truly outstanding. Shun Chao really couldn't figure out why Bixia sect held any appeal to Yan Wushi, so he had been forced to conclude that it was a whim. However, he hadn't expected that this whim would send Yan Wushi tagging along for the entire journey, saying nothing about going their separate ways. Now that they were about to enter Bixia sect's gates, Shun Chao felt his head throbbing nonstop, fearful of what trouble this fiend might unleash upon the sect. He tried again and again to get rid of him, but it was to no avail. Instead, he spent the entire journey being messed with, which left him thoroughly despondent. Upon hearing that all the inns within 10 miles were full, Shun Chao couldn't help a slight frown as he considered whether they should climb the mountain that night. After all, Bixia sect was located just halfway up the mountain. If he hadn't been considering Yuan Song's youth and frailty, a small distance like that would have been no issue. Yan Wushi seemed to have read his thoughts. Why don't we let Yuan Song sleep on the bed, and the 2 of us can play some Weiqi outside? Shun Chao gave a wry smile. Is Sect Leader Yan still unwilling to tell me? Just why are you going to Bixia sect? My venerable self has already said that it's for you, said Yan Wushi. But you didn't believe me. Shun Chao shook his head. Of course he didn't believe him. I'm still gradually recovering my martial arts. Currently, I have around 8 to 9/10 of my past strength, but it'd be a bit of a stretch to say that I'm your match. If I fight you, my chances of victory are slim. so I'm still unworthy of being your opponent. Yan Wushi raised an eyebrow. Taoist Master Shun, your beloved Taoist path of cultivation emphasizes spiritual tranquility and non-interference, yet you carry around thoughts of murder and battle day in and day out. If you're so full of wrath, how many eons will you take to attain Taoist enlightenment? His gaze swept over Shun Chao and Yuan Song, whose expressions were equally speechless. He casually threw in another line. I heard that there's a peerless beauty at Bixia sect, whose name is Yue Kun Shi. Shun Chao was stunned. That's the sect leader Shixiong, and he's a man. You actually... That sect leader should be a woman? That's right. Then let me try again, said Yan Wushi. I heard that the Bixia sect leader is a peerless beauty whose appearance surpasses even Yuan Xiuxiu's. My venerable self has admired her for a long time, so I wish to meet her. Shun Chao stared at him. You don't sound like you've admired her for very long at all. Whatever the case, Yan Wushi insisted on coming, and Shun Chao was helpless to stop him. Without understanding his reasons, he couldn't very well take it upon himself to deny him entrance, breeding enmity between Yan Wushi and Bixia sect for no reason. After they finished their meal, the concierge took the three of them to their room. The room was indeed as elegantly furnished as the innkeeper had claimed. Leaving aside Shun Chao, who was easy to accommodate, even Yuan Song revealed an expression of delight. For the sake of his future disciple, Shun Chao felt that sacrificing a night here was worth it. Yuan Song was quickly urged into bed, but Yan Wushi grabbed Shun Chao. Let's play a game. Shun Chao gracefully denied. This humble Taoist isn't a skilled player. Yan Wushi said coolly, back when your eyes were bad, you even played blind against yourself. Shun Chao hadn't expected him to remember so clearly. How embarrassing. Unable to refuse any further, he could only sit down. The first match, Shun Chao eked out a small victory. Yan Wushi told Shun Chao, your skills and mine are about equal, and this time I lost due to a couple of mistakes. You should let this venerable one have a chance at victory as well. That's only fair. Shun Chao had wanted to meditate and train, but when he heard these words, he ultimately couldn't bear it. All right, then let's play another. In the second match, Shun Chao lost to Yan Wushi, but it was by an even smaller margin than the first, practically only a single move. Yan Wushi gently consoled him. It was only because I had the advantage of going first. You can make the first move this time. Shun Chao frowned as he stared at the board, thinking that something seemed off, but never having been the competitive type, he responded right away. Let's stop. Wins and losses are unimportant. You won once and I won once. With this, we're even. This game is akin to the sword, said Yan Wushi. Did you gain any insights? Shun Chao was taken aback, then scrutinized the board for a moment before shaking his head. Forgive me for being slow. I don't see it. Let's play another game, said Yan Wushi. This time, appreciate it properly. Advancing and retreating are akin to swinging a sword at an enemy. If you grasp this, the rest will follow. Shun Chao had always admired his insight into martial arts. He immediately agreed and approached the game with greater seriousness. He's really too gullible, Yan Wushi thought. Spin any sort of nonsense and he'll believe it. With their third match, the two of them finally played to a draw. By this time, the ends of the pitch-black sky were now edged with a faint gold. Shun Chao stared at the board for a long time before he finally couldn't take it anymore. I've heard that the board is like a battlefield, and one can thoroughly understand the hearts of men and the art of war through it. But I can't see anything related to the sword here. Did you lie to me on purpose? As if nothing was amiss, Yan Wushi said, Of course not. You misunderstood. Naturally, he wouldn't admit that he'd only done it because he found the sight of Shun Chao struggling as he deliberated incredibly entertaining. Then may I ask sect leader Yan to explain the insights he gleaned so that this humble Taoist may grasp them as well? Yan Wushi stood up. The sun's risen. This venerable one will wake you in song. Without carving, jade cannot be made useful. He should practice the sword. Shun Chao was speechless. Chapter 192. Giving Pointers. Shun Chao brought Yuan Song up the mountain. Yan Wushi remained behind them the entire time, neither close nor far as he looked around. his manner leisurely. After the tragic event, Bixia sect had very few men left, but as they still needed to patrol the area, they couldn't spare any sentries for the foot of the mountain. Shen Chao's entire climb went smoothly and unimpeded. It was only when they were almost at the mountain gates that they saw a silhouette walk toward them, carrying a sword. What lofty person graces Bixia sect with their presence? Only after saying this did he see Shen Chao, and his expression immediately transformed from wariness to surprised delight. Even his tone changed completely. So it's you, Taoist Master Shen. Shen Chao laughed. Yuanbai, your skills have improved yet again, truly worthy of celebration. Fan Yuanbai was Yue Kunqir's disciple, so naturally he was Shen Chao's junior. There was nothing wrong with calling him by name. Back during Shen Chao's duel with Kunye, everyone from Bixia sect had been there as witnesses, making them all keenly aware of his abilities. So, when Fan Yuanbai heard Shen Chao's compliment, he grew even happier. I'm deeply grateful for Taoist Master Shen's praise. Please enter. Your esteemed self has always remained in Shitsuan and Zhangmeng Shishu's hearts. With you gone for so long without news, they sent people to try and find some. We heard that you fought 2 of Hehuan sect elders in Chang'an, and that they perished beneath your blade. The entirety of Bixia sect is overjoyed. Your esteemed self is truly formidable. He never spoke much in front of outsiders, but the moment he got to know someone, Fan Yuanbai had the tendency to chatter endlessly. Shen Chao smiled, eyes crinkling as he listened. He didn't cut him off, but let him speak as much as he wished. Bixia sect had much fewer disciples, but their hearts had grown more united. Even after such great losses, after experiencing all those sorrows, everyone's faces shone with smiles, and their relationships had grown more harmonious as well. On their way in, the group encountered only a few insignificant disciples, but Shen Chao had performed the grand deed of rescuing Bixia sect from a crisis, so upon seeing him, those disciples had the same reaction as Fan Yuanbai. And because of Shen Chao, neither Yan Wushi nor Yuan Song were subject to interrogation as they climbed the mountain with him. It was just that Yan Wushi's appearance was too eye-catching, and he inevitably received much curious scrutiny. In contrast, Yuan Song was rather inconspicuous. Zhao Chiying just so happened to be discussing matters with Yue Kunqir. When she heard that Shen Chao had returned, she quickly went out to greet him personally. Though it'd been some time, Zhao Chiying was as elegant as ever. She couldn't be considered a peerless beauty, but she was fair and lovely nonetheless. Her status as sect leader had also given her a graceful composure no common woman could possess. Shen Chao had never seen such a bearing on even Hehuan sect leader Yuan Xiuxiu. Zhao Chiying cupped her hands and smiled. Taoist Master Shen has finally returned. Mount Tai is on the coast of the Eastern Sea, thousands of miles away from Chang'an, so news was slow to arrive. We heard of your 1-on-3 battle in Chang'an only a short time ago and were astounded by your magnificence. Never did we expect this. Speak of Cao Cao, and he will arrive. Shen Chao returned the greeting. I was gone for quite some time and left Shiwu here. I've given sect leader Zhao much trouble. Taoist Master Shen exaggerates. Shiwu is a good child. He might be young, but he possesses great discipline and never needs prodding from others. Every day before sunrise, he attends morning classes with the rest of the disciples. He is ceaselessly diligent, day in and day out. Hearing this, Shen Chao was naturally thrilled, and he turned to exchange pleasantries with Yue Kunqir as well. Zhao Chiying had already noticed the people standing behind Shen Chao, one tall and one short. Now she smiled and asked, "And who are they, I wonder?" Shen Chao gave a slight cough. One is Huanyue sect leader Yan, and the other, younger one, is Yuan Song. He's a child I brought from Chang'an. Being from Chang'an and having the surname Yuan, anyone who'd heard about how Shen Chao had fought Hehuan sect, rescuing a Yuan clan orphan from the midst of a 1,000-strong army, would quickly surmise who Yuan Song must be. However, everyone's attention was instead ensnared by the first introduction Shen Chao had made. A man's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. Once his identity as Huanyue sect leader was out, everyone had the same reaction. Their hearts gave a small jolt. The numerous curious gazes aimed at Yan Wushi instantly became complicated. There was awe, fear, and shock, and some disbelief. Most of Bixia Sect's disciples had never seen Yan Wushi in person, but that didn't stop them from hearing a great many stories concerning him. To them, Qi Fengge and Cui Wang were more or less few figures of myth, and Yan Wushi, who matched their strength and had nearly fought them to a draw, was practically a legend as well. Under an assortment of measuring, scrutinizing gazes, Yan Wushi stood with his hands behind his back, his expression relaxed. There wasn't a hint of discomfort about him. It was obvious he was used to this. Shun Chao had left the mountain to save a man, and during this trip he'd experienced all sorts of ups and downs, twists and turns. Zhao Churying had heard of some of it, but with the distance so vast, her knowledge wasn't very detailed. She hadn't expected that Shun Chao, in going to save someone, would bring that very someone back. She was stunned for a while, then just barely managed to recover and cup her hands. Sect Leader Yan's illustrious reputation precedes him. Bixia Sect Leader Zhao Churying respectfully welcomes the esteemed Sect Leader Yan to visit. Our sect is but a humble one, so if our hospitality is lacking in any way, I must ask your forgiveness. As Zhao Churying was a sect leader, the attitude she showed now was already incredibly earnest and polite. After all, Yan Wushi was famous for being capricious. Zhao Churying did not wish to upset him over potential discourtesies that might arise over minute details. Sect Leader Zhao handles matters with great equity and possesses rigorous moral standards, said Yan Wushi. I have heard much of you. On the way here, Ah Chao also praised you highly. Now that we finally meet, I can see that your reputation is well earned. I hope that my unexpected visit will not bring Sect Leader Zhao any trouble. Eh? This was a fairly normal response. Not only was Zhao Churying surprised, even Shun Chao was a little astounded. Yan Wushi wore a slight smile, his demeanor gentle and polite. From head to toe, he radiated an aura of amicability. One couldn't see even a hint of arrogance and scandalousness typical of the demonic sex. The only issue was that Ah Chao, which sounded a little too intimate, but having heard it so much, Shun Chao was already numb to the name. Everyone else found it strange, but they couldn't say why. They only thought that Shun Chao and the Huanyue sect leader must share some remarkable relationship. With such a good start, everything that followed also went smoothly. Everyone gave their courtesies and took a seat. Having heard the news, Shiwu ran over. The reunion between master and disciple made for a moving scene. Shiwu was overcome with emotion and threw himself into Shun Chao's arms, in full view of onlookers. Shun Chao was very gratified to notice that he'd grown somewhat taller. On the side, Yuan Song examined the future Shishong of his. He was curious, but also a little disappointed. It was obvious that the other boy was older than him, yet his words and actions were even softer than his own. Being so reliant on Shutsuan, just when would he be able to gain independence? However, he'd forgotten about the days right after he left Chang'an, when he was racked with anxiety. Every night he'd needed to see Shun Chao's figure before he could slip peacefully into sleep. Separate from these childish manners, Zhao Churying said to Shun Chao, Taoist Master Shun's return was perfectly timed. The Bixia sect's numbers have fallen greatly, and we're in dire need of more disciples. My Shishong and I were worrying over this matter. Could Taoist Master Shun help us with ideas? Sect leader, Yue Kunchi said tactfully. Taoist Master Shun has just arrived after a long journey. He must be exhausted. Wouldn't it be better to let him rest before discussing? Zhao Churying became a little embarrassed. Shishong is right. I was too impatient. I'll have Yuan Bai take you elsewhere so you can rest first. Would the house you stayed in last time be acceptable? Shun Chao nodded. That would be excellent. I'm sorry to have troubled Sect Leader Zhao. Qilang can stay in the room next to Shiwu's. That would also help to build their relationship. Very well, said Zhao Churying. On the eastern side of our sect is a bamboo building reserved for honored guests. If Sect Leader Yan does not mind, he can stay there. The house Shun Chao had stayed in last time was meant for elders of the sect, which also demonstrated that Bixia sect didn't see him as an outsider. However, if they had Yan Wushi stay there, it would look like a snub instead. Yet Yan Wushi said, No need to trouble yourself so. I'll stay with Ah Chao. Zhao Churying's expression faltered. Huh? Won't that be an inconvenience? Yan Wushi raised an eyebrow. Why would it be an inconvenience? We use the same arrangements during our travels. My venerable self has stayed in the same room as him more times than I can remember. It was true, of course, but the words coming out of his mouth seemed to carry a different connotation. Shunchao couldn't help but say, urgency is a priority while traveling, so it was fine then. But now, Sec Leader Yan will be able to enjoy a more comfortable stay. If you refuse, you would be brushing off Sec Leader Zhao's good intentions. No matter, said Yan Wushi. My relationship with Ah Chao is no ordinary one. Since he has such a high opinion of Bixia sect, you lot need not treat my venerable self as an outsider either. Be at ease. Does his house not have a single empty one next to it? Though he was smiling as he spoke, Zhao Chunying could feel a palpable, intimidating pressure from him. Under that kind of gaze, even her scalp seemed to tighten. Before she could ponder more, she already found herself saying, There is. Yan Wushi gave a slight smile. Then all is well. This smile was different from the one just before. Zhao Chunying could tangibly feel the pressure on her body lifting. She silently breathed a sigh of relief and quickly called for Fan Yuanbai, then had him take the party away so they could rest. Once Shunchao and the others had left, only the Shixiong and Shimei pair remained within the council chamber. Yue Kunchu's expression transformed into one of great relief, like a heavy burden had been lifted. Just let Sec Leader Yan stay next to whoever he wants. It's not as though we lack for empty houses. From what I saw, Taoist Master Shun didn't make any firm objections. That means tacit approval. Just now, I wanted to tell you not to go against Sec Leader Yan's wishes, but I couldn't have imagined that I'd find myself almost unable to speak. He didn't know that the reason Shunchao hadn't given a firm objection was because even if he tried to, it would have been pointless. Zhao Chunying gave a wry smile. Shixiong can make fun of me, for I was a little better. Bixia sect and Huanyue sect have never had any dealings. Our small temple cannot house such a great Buddha. I also have no idea what he intends by coming here. Could it hurt our Bixia sect? Yue Kunchu was more optimistic. With Taoist Master Shun here, I doubt anything would happen. It's said that Yan Wushi is mercurial, but we only need to keep a bit more caution and tell our disciples to be careful with their words and actions so as not to offend him. Zhao Chunying nodded. That is true. Elsewhere, Fan Yuanbai had brought Shunchao's party to the house where they would rest. As it was cleaned year-round, it was pristine, and there were even water bamboo and bluegrass orchids placed within, remarkably tasteful and refined. If Sec Leader Yan and Taoist Master Shun need anything, please send word. I am always at your service. Fan Yuanbai had wanted to speak some more to Shunchao, but when he saw Yan Wushi standing to the side, he couldn't speak a single word more. He stiffly finished his speech, hurriedly ending the conversation, then turned tail and fled. Shiwu was still young, and thus not particularly sensitive. He'd waited a long time for Shunchao to finish talking with Zhao Chunying so that they could have a private moment to themselves and catch up. So even though Yan Wushi and Yuan Song were nearby, it didn't stop him from tugging at Shunchao and voicing his yearning. Shutsun, you were away for far too long. This disciple missed you dearly. Shunchao patted his head. While this master was outside, he naturally missed you a great deal as well. I heard that you've been doing well at Bixia sect, and it seems you've grown taller too. Shiwu nodded somewhat shyly. The Shixiong at Bixia sect are very kind to me. Since Shutsun left, I've been practicing the sword every day so as not to disappoint you. Now I can even execute the entire set of the Azure Wave sword techniques. The tone of these words held a hint of childish sweetness and yearning for long unheard praise. Yuan Song couldn't resist pouting to himself. He's even a couple years older than me, he thought. Am I really supposed to call him Shixiong in the future? Shunchao smiled. Is that so? Then you can show me now. Shiwu hesitated. Will it disturb Shutsun's rest? We already rested last night at the base of the mountain, said Shunchao. And it's not yet noon. The day is still early. This master is not yet tired. Hearing this, Shiwu happily went to retrieve his sword. He'd studied the sword for less than a year, still but a beginner, so he wielded a wooden sword rather than a real one. Beneath the attention of 3 people, he stood and bowed, then stretched his arm forth, twirling his sword in a manner of the first stance. His hand and sword rose and fell, and his every move was measured and systematic, structured and meticulous. Though not poor, his moves were also nothing extraordinary. Shiwu's natural talent was still a level below Yuan Song's, but Shiwu knew that he was of only average aptitude, so he trained twice as hard. His sword techniques were already quite adroit. I asked for Shitsuen's instruction. Shiwu put away his sword and stood straight, his tone earnest. Shenqiao didn't want to crush his spirits, so he first chose to mention some of his strong points. Generally, you've learned the movements well, he said. I can tell that you must have arduously practiced. You didn't spend these days slacking off. Then he continued. However, some of your sword moves were executed incorrectly, which will affect your strength. This master only demonstrated the set to you once, so it would have been hard for you to remember them in full detail. Now I'll re-demonstrate this set of sword techniques for you from beginning to end. Pay closer attention and, if you can, compare them to your own. Yes, Shiwu said solemnly. Shenqiao didn't use Shan He Tong Bei, but instead took Shiwu's wooden sword from his hands. He gave a sly smile. The Azure Wave sword techniques are true to their name. The great seas are boundless, the waves tempestuous. The ocean engulfs the mountain stones countless times, yet again and again those rocks will rise above the water's surface. The radiant sunbeams, the majestic waves, they all come together to create magnificent scenery. Those who practice this set of sword techniques must be as magnanimous as the sea that accepts 100 rivers. Only then can one harness the true essence of these moves. You must climb Mount Tai to view the great seas. If you can climb higher and look further. In time, you'll achieve your own enlightenment. After he finished, he didn't wait for Shiwu to respond, but raised the sword. It was the same wooden sword, but when placed in the hands of someone else, the power unleashed was of an entirely different level. Shiwu, having just started on his martial arts journey, had shown swordplay that was utterly unremarkable, so much that Yuan Song found it dull. Yet, when Shenqiao began to swing his sword, Yuan Song's eyes went round, unable to believe that Shiwu and Shenqiao were using the same set of sword techniques. A scouring wind came from the sword's swings, its blade a fury of after-images. Though Shenqiao didn't use true qi, that wooden sword still seemed to shine with a brilliant radiance that accompanied his moves. Yuan Song could almost see the tumultuous waves of the great sea, the dark clouds and scattering rain, the rainbow dipping into the waters. And standing within 1,000 yards of white waves was a single man. All his eyes could see was this man, and all of heaven and earth. This man was the sole existence. Even after he finished the entire set of techniques, now standing still, the images from before lingered in Yuan Song's vision. For a long time, they did not fade. Yan Wushi was smiling. Ah Chao has achieved transcendental perfection with regard to the sword. You have attained the echelon of grandmasters. Shenqiao smiled back. I'm deeply grateful to Secretary Yan for his support. But for Shiwu and Yuan Song, did you glean anything? He asked. Please forgive this disciple for being clumsy with his words, Shiwu replied falteringly. I only felt myself surging with emotion, as if something wished to burst forth from my chest, but I'm unable to give a proper description. It's all right, Shenqiao said gently. No one can achieve enlightenment with a single glance. Take your time to digest it. If there's anything you can't understand, just ask. Yes, said Shiwu respectfully. Then Shenqiao turned to Yuan Song. You've yet to formally join the sect, and you've only been meditating while resting for the past few days. If you can't manage a comment, there's no issue either. My heart is filled with words upon words, uncountably numerous, said Yuan Song, but I can only manage a scant few lines as description. When he spoke, he always came across as old and grizzled despite his age. Shenqiao found it very amusing. Which few lines? It appears as the cloud-shrouded moon and drifts like the snow carried on swirling winds. As one gazes from afar, it glows like the dawning sun, and when peering up close, it dazzles like a lotus above green waters. This was from Luo Shenfu, about the beauty of the Luo River's nymph. Shen Qiao was caught between laughing and crying, but he had to say something. Yuan Song had indeed grasped the vital thread related to the Azure Wave sword technique, the idea that the heart is dazzling in its ever-changing majesty, while the sword is dexterous, graceful in its agility. Just from this point, Yuan Song indeed possessed more aptitude than Shi Wu. Yan Wushi gave a silent sneer. He doesn't even have the slightest foundations for practicing martial arts. Reciting Luo Shun Fu was just him seeing the surface and trying to be clever. It'd be such a waste for such a talent to be squandered on wordplay. You should let this venerable one sharpen and polish him thoroughly. He didn't wait for a response before his palm came down on Yuan Song's shoulder. The boy gasped. Then his body dropped involuntarily. The acupoints of his upper body were sealed. "Sec Leader Yan?" Yuan Song was dumbfounded, his body bent in a half-crouch and completely unable to move. The worst part was that he still didn't know what he'd said or done wrong. Yan Wushi saw that Shen Qiao was about to speak, but stole ahead first. With the shadow of a smile on his face, he said, "Speaking so frivolously to your Shifu would merit a punishment even in Huanyue sect, which you take as a demonic sect. Ah Qiao, you're far too gentle when teaching your disciples. Surely I don't need to teach them proper discipline on your behalf." Shen Qiao's face was stony. "Have you finally given up on stealing my disciples, Sec Leader Yan?" Yan Wushi said leisurely, "Out of consideration for his life, I won't fight you over him anymore. Otherwise, my venerable self fears that I'd end up killing him right after I accept him." On that first day of their meeting, no one other than Shen Qiao and Shi Wu had witnessed how Yan Wushi treated Yuan Song, so all the disciples of Bixia sect thought him quite amiable, completely different from the rumors. But on the second day, they realized they were wrong. After morning class finished, the disciples all gathered in the practice field to train and spar. Yan Wushi stood to the side, hands behind his back. Even in the case of a personal demonstration by Yue Kunshi or Zhao Chiying, he'd pick at their flaws, pointing them out in an airy, condescending tone. The Bixia sect disciples were greatly displeased and took the initiative to challenge him. Each and every one of them was sent tumbling to the ground, and in the end, even Zhao Chiying and Yue Kunshi fell in defeat. By the time Shen Qiao heard of this after exiting seclusion and hurried over, it was midday, and Yan Wushi had already fought the entire Bixia sect from top to bottom. Of course, with Yan Wushi's abilities, annihilating the entire sect was no difficult task. But a martial arts grandmaster pushing around a tiny sect like this, instead of picking on someone his own size? What was going on? Surely he couldn't be looking for some sense of fulfillment to amuse himself with? If not for Shen Qiao's presence, Bixia sect would have thought that this man was here to trash their place. Standing before the immense field of casualties, Shen Qiao could only pull a strained smile and apologize to Zhao Chiying. Zhao Chiying remained unexpectedly gracious as she waved her hand and smiled. "Sec Leader Yan only thought our martial arts inadequate, so he gave us some pointers. Bixia sect is too happy to receive such an opportunity." When she said this, everyone else began to feel that her words were true. Many of them would never achieve martial arts worthy of a sect leader in their lifetime, let alone anywhere close to Yan Wushi's. Everyone wished to be strong. Just the chance to spar with Yan Wushi once was more than worth it. Even if it had meant heavy injuries, let alone something small like getting thrashed and humiliated, it was invaluable to their journey on the martial path. With this thought, the disciples' gazes as they watched Yan Wushi instantly transformed from fearful displeasure to reverent yearning. Yue Kunshi had been clutching his arms and sighing about how stately his shirmei was, befitting of a sect leader, when a voice nearby said softly, "How does it feel to hold a torch for someone for decades on end while being too scared to confess? My venerable self has no experience with this. Please enlighten me." This voice was like an arrow to his heart, one that pierced right into a hidden place buried deep within. Yue Kunshi's hair stood on end, and his face twisted in horror. Instantly, he looked at Yan Wushi with the expression of one who'd seen a ghost. Before Yue Kunshi could reply, Shen Qiao showed up and dragged Yan Wushi away. Yan Wushi didn't fight him either. He let Shen Chao pull him aside, a bright smile still affixed to his face. Shen Chao held his forehead. Sec Leader Yan, are you bored with nothing to do? Yan Wushi said curiously, What do you mean, nothing to do? Every day, I must amuse myself with you and give pointers to that useless rabble. I'm incredibly busy. The corner of Shen Chao's mouth twitched. He was speechless for a long stretch before he found his voice again. You should have been in Chang'an assisting the new emperor, yet you followed me such a vast distance to Bixia sect. I doubt you came for something as trivial as sightseeing or messing with others. Are you still unwilling to tell me the reason, even now? If you switch to a new address, this venerable one will consider telling you. How about that? Shen Chao was baffled. What address? How about Yanlang? So he really was messing with me, Shen Chao thought. Without a single word, he simply turned and left. Chapter 93. Day to Day. There will be great changes to the current Jianghu. If you wish to return to Xuandu Mountain, it's better to do so sooner than later. Yan Wushi's words stopped Shen Chao in his tracks. He was taken aback for a moment. Then he asked, How did you know that I wanted to go to Xuandu Mountain? Yan Wushi chuckled. Ah, Qiao, all your thoughts are written upon your face. I know you like I know myself. How could I fail to tell? Shen Chao didn't realize that Yan Wushi was messing around with him again. Instead, he believed that Yan Wushi's eyes were sharp enough to see right through his thoughts. Even if he found the man's behavior disagreeable, this ability alone was valuable enough that he wanted to learn from Yan Wushi, hoping to patch his own weakness. He earnestly consulted him. I really can't bring myself to call you that, and even if I do, it only bring you brief amusement. How does that help you? I'm indeed inferior to you when it comes to judging matters and people, so I sincerely request an explanation, Sec Leader Yan. I'm willing to offer other things in return. Yan Wushi was all smiles. Very well then, but you must remember what you owe me. Shen Chao thought for a while, then nodded. As long as you don't ask me to do anything criminal or inhumane, nor will I betray righteousness. In my opinion, said Yan Wushi, murder helps humanity. It eliminates scourges on the earth who are wastes of space. Hence, it's not inhumane at all. So why are you so reluctant? Shen Chao furrowed his brows. If you insist on using such twisted arguments, just pretend I never asked anything. He was about to leave, but Yan Wushi stopped him and said with a smile, All right. I was only joking with you. My venerable self will never ask you to do anything you consider criminal or inhumane. Surely that's fine. Their current relationship was a terribly tricky one. They couldn't be called enemies, but neither did they interact in a way expected of normal friends. At least Zhao Chiying and Yue Kunchi would never use such a tone when speaking with Shen Chao. He didn't even find the words intimate or provocative. No such suggestive descriptions came to mind. He only thought that Yan Wushi had always been this way, erratic and mercurial, always doing as he pleased. He was used to it now, so it no longer mattered. Then please grace me with your insights, Sec Leader Yan, he said. Seeing that he'd gotten all he could, Yan Wushi decided to let things go. Do you know of Han Feng? Shen Chao said, The Han Feng who was once one of the 3 nobles of Qi with Muti Po. I remember that his daughter was an external disciple of Bixia sect. I met her once in Yecheng, but as I was still blind then, I don't know what she looks like. Yan Wushi laughed. True. I'd almost forgotten. My Qiao was born so handsome. It's not surprising that she fell for you. She even took the chance to strike up conversation, right? Shen Chao was perplexed. Why are you mentioning her all of a sudden? Just because she has ties with Bixia sect? Is that why you came here? It is, said Yan Wushi, but not entirely. I had 3 reasons for coming to Bixia sect, and she was but one of them. In fact, she's the least important one. Han Feng followed Gao Wei and surrendered to the Zhou dynasty, but Han Ying is more loyal than her father. She insists that Gao Zhao should take the throne, and she wishes to restore the country. Given her relationship with Bixia sect, it's highly likely she'll arrive here to request help from her sect, to have them join her campaign to revive Qi. Bixia sect took several losses after their tragedy, Shen Chao pointed out. Even if they wanted to help, they'd lack strength. Furthermore, sect leader Zhao is determined to keep her sect away from the power struggles of the secular world. If Han Ying did come, she probably wouldn't agree to such a request. Yan Wushi disagreed. Deep down, you two know very well that being in the thick of things can prevent some people from seeing clearly. You should look for an opportunity to clarify this matter with Zhao Zhiying. If Qi wishes for revival, they'll need support from the Gokturks. Bixia sect is a small sect. If they overestimate themselves and collude with the Gokturks, fate will not be kind to them. Shen Chao was confused. Sect leader Zhao has never seemed like someone so foolish to me. You seem to hold some heavy prejudice against her. Has she wronged you before? Yan Wushi didn't answer his question and instead changed the subject. Yuan elevated that bald donkey, Xueting, but he also promoted He Huan's sect, who are completely unrelated. He's undermining everyone, as emperors do, to maintain a balance of power. He believes that this will make it easier to exert control, but none of them are fools. Whether it's Xueting or He Huan sect, they can see through his plans, and they'll take this opportunity to aggressively shore up their influence. Is this why you said that the current Jianghu will experience great changes soon? Shen Xiao was in deep thought. Huanyue sect has moved from open operations to covert ones. While it's good to lie low and bide your time, if He Huan sect jumps to expand their influence, they'll inevitably clash with you. Aren't you worried about the losses Huanyue sect might suffer if they do? Yan Wushi smiled, completely carefree. Foolish Ah Chao. Now that they have you and you in support, they're like the high sun at noon. What's wrong with letting them bite and tear at each other? Why should I hop out to give them a free excuse to unite against me? As they expand their influence, they certainly won't let a gold mine like Xuandu Mountain escape. But that Shirdi of yours, he's so proud and arrogant that he'd never take it lying down, so conflict will be inevitable. That's why I said there's no need to hurry back to Xuandu Mountain. He paused before continuing. Duen Wenyang allied with various forces to kill me. He even coordinated all sorts of offenses to have a father and son destroy one another. Do you understand why? Shen Qiao nodded. The Gokturks don't want to see a powerful united north, so Yuan Yong had to die, and you, who support Yuan Yong, naturally must also die. Yan Wushi smiled. Indeed, the time you spent in the secular world hasn't gone to waste. However, you were much cuter when you'd just awoken and couldn't remember anything, as transparent as glazed snow, and oh so trusting. Shen Chao's face went dark. That's only because I was more gullible then. You liked that, didn't you? Ah Chao truly understands me so well, said Yan Wushi with satisfaction. This man was beyond shameless. Shen Chao desperately wished to turn around and leave, but he couldn't bear to just yet. Yan Wushi had said quite a bit just now, and though Shen Chao himself had already figured out a fair amount, once the other man had spoken, it was as if the scattered Weiqi pieces had suddenly realigned themselves, like brushing away clouds to reveal the moon or the tides receding to expose the rocks. What you're saying then, said Shen Chao, is that the most worrisome enemy is neither Xueting nor He Huan sect, but the Gokturks? This move from Duen Wenyang was set in motion since the day he entered the capital to see Empress Ashina, said Yan Wushi. Perhaps it was even earlier. And the gold lotus ring he demanded from Su Wei's mother when he arrived at the Su residence too, that was no ordinary ring. That's right, said Shen Qiao. Madame Qin and Duen Wenyang both said so, that it was a keepsake. I've been dispatching people to investigate this entire time, said Yan Wushi, but I only received the answer a few days back. That ring is indeed a keepsake, but it's no ordinary keepsake. Rather, it's proof that Hulugu's defeated all the martial experts of the Khaganate, a symbol of his status. It can be used to mobilize some 20-odd martial arts masters from all over the eastern and western Khaganate. The Gokturks occupy a vast territory, so these experts are usually scattered all over. Even the Khagan himself might have trouble summoning them. But this keepsake can do just that, and with half the effort. From what I know, Duen Wenyang is a first-rate martial artist, said Shen Qiao, but they say he has Han blood, so his status within the Khaganate is not very high. I doubt that the keepsake alone would be enough to win the Gokturk's trust. Shunchao jolted. Unless Hulugu is still alive? If Hulugu were still alive, he was the only one who'd have the right to use that keepsake to assemble the 20-odd Gokturk masters. But if this were the case, then things had just become much more thorny and complicated. 2 decades ago, Tifengge had dueled Hulugu and eked out a small victory, forcing him to swear to stay out of the Central Plains for 20 years. Now, the time limit was up, and Shunchao's Shutsuen had already passed on. If Hulugu were still alive, his martial ability could only have soared even higher. With the Gokturk's current movements, if Hulugu again entered the Central Plains, it would definitely not be for simple sparring and reminiscence. Once that happened, who could stop him? It isn't impossible, said Yan Wushi. However, as there's no evidence yet, you need not worry about it. Shunchao pulled himself out of his worried thoughts. Before, you said that you had 3 reasons for staying at Bisha sect. Just now, you told me one of them. What are the other 2? Yan Wushi gave a slight smile. The second, naturally, is you. Then, the third? The third is also you. Shunchao's mouth twitched. This humble Taoist has neither the virtue nor ability. I'm unworthy of such regard from Sect Leader Yan. But you do possess both virtue and ability, said Yan Wushi with a smile. Since that's the case, of course you're worthy of my regard. And aside from those matters, there's also your beauty. You're practically perfect beyond reproach. At this moment, Fan Yuanbai walked over and greeted them. Sect Leader Yan, Taoist Master Shun, our sect leader has some words for you. Because we didn't expect the arrival of honored guests, we didn't have time to make proper preparations before. But today, we've specially thrown a banquet, and we ask you to grant us the honor of attending. Yan Wushi grabbed Shunchao's hand without waiting for his answer. Sect Leader Zhao is too courteous. We will respectfully honor her wishes. Shunchao was unable to pull his hand back. You act like I'm not going. What are you doing, Sect Leader Yan? Ah, Chao, have you never heard of walking arm in arm? That's reserved only for the closest of friends. Yan Wushi looked dismayed. Are we not the closest of friends? This humble Taoist possesses no such sentiments. This venerable one saved your life beneath Banbu Peak. Doesn't that count as a gargantuan favor? It does. I resolutely put my life on the line to lure away Song Jingxing back outside the capital of Feng province. Were you really not the slightest bit moved? I was, but don't forget, I've saved you several times as well. Aren't I right then? How many people in the world have shared as many life and death experiences as we have? Don't you feel extremely honored to have someone as charming as my venerable self as your friend? Can I say no? Asked Shunchao. No, said Yan Wushi. So Shunchao said nothing. Fan Yuanbai watched dumbfounded. To think that Sect Leader Yan shares such a close relationship with Taoist Master Shun. No wonder Taoist Master Shun brought him up the mountain as a guest, he thought. That means even the pointers Sect Leader Yan gave on our martial arts were certainly for Taoist Master Shun's sake. Some of our Shudi were unhappy, thinking that he was deliberately picking a fight with us, but they really shouldn't be. When I head back, I must tell them off. Because Shunchao had a moral character, Fan Yuanbai assumed that Yan Wushi too must have held good intentions, but this was nothing more than a beautiful misunderstanding. If Shunchao had heard his thoughts, he'd definitely have told him that Yan Wushi was indeed deliberately picking a fight. The 3 of them arrived at the flower hall, where the preparation for the banquet had long since been completed. Zhao Cheying had ordered everything. She specially had a chef from an inn at the foot of the mountain purchase the ingredients, then ascend the mountain to cook here. Naturally, the quality and taste of the food was higher than anything the disciples of Bisha sect could make. Bisha sect had very few disciples left, just enough to fill 1 table. Zhao Cheying stood up and offered a toast with a cup of wine, welcoming Yan Wushi's visit and hoping that he wouldn't mind the Spartan state of the sect. Yan Wushi left her quite a bit of face himself. He raised his own cup and said, Sect Leader Zhao need not be so courteous. Ah Chao is soft and simple by nature. When the things and people he cares about are in question, I also can't help but worry about them on his behalf. You came out of your own volition, thought Shunchao. What does this have to do with me? Zhao Chiying found herself wondering, why do these words sound so strange? But she didn't think too much about it and placed her cup down with a carefree smile. Though we had a chef specially ascend the mountain and prepare this banquet, Lu cuisine is fairly different from that of Chang'an. I don't know if it'll suit Sec Leader Yan's tastes. I hope you won't mind, and feel free to eat as you wish. After the opening speech, everyone picked up their chopsticks and began to eat. Shunchao recalled the matter that Yan Wushi had brought up earlier concerning Han Ying. Since he was sitting next to Zhao Chiying at the banquet, he took the opportunity to ask her a few things. As he expected, Zhao Chiying was astonished. Yue Shishong took Han Ying as his disciple while he was outside, so she only counts as an external disciple. Even I have never met her myself. There's even less to be said about any relationship with Bixia sect. Thank you, Taoist Master Shun, for telling me this. I'll ask Yue Shishong once I get back and take note of it myself. Her tone was colored with dejection as she added, with the way Bixia sect is right now, though, even if she is seeking outside help, I doubt she'd pick this place. Shunchao tried to think up a solution for her. Could you head down the mountain and recruit some talented disciples? Dao Xiong used to lead Xuandu Mountain, said Zhao Chiying, so forgive me for being forward, but may I ask how Xuandu Mountain went about recruiting disciples? At the foot of Xuandu Mountain lies Xuandu Town, Shunchao explained. Though it's small, it's quite bustling, so every year Xuandu Mountain would send people down the mountain to find disciples. We'd set up special areas within the town. Anyone interested in entering the sect could go there to apply. When the time came, we'd accept them based on their aptitudes and dispositions. Zhao Chiying sighed. I see. I was too forward with my question. Xuandu Mountain is the world's foremost Taoist sect, so of course there'd be no dearth of disciples coming to apply of their own volition. And Dao Xiong knows about Bixia sect's current situation as well. To be honest, there are potential disciples from farming families at the foot of the mountain who are willing to join us, but many of them are too old. Their parents see that they lack the strength for farm work, so they get sent up the mountain in search of a master. But those children are mostly of poor aptitude, and they have long passed the ideal age to begin their training in martial arts. On the other hand, those with better credentials are rarely willing to travel such long distances to Bixia sect. They'd likely just enter another nearer one. As time passes, the situation will only worsen. As the sect leader, she naturally had to take into account long-term considerations on behalf of her sect. The only thing that could support a sect was talent. Without talent, the sect would die off sooner or later. Currently, a lack of that talent was Bixia sect's biggest problem. The disciples underneath Zhao Chiying and Yue Kunchi, like Fan Yuanbai and Zhao Yexue, were of only average aptitude. To put it bluntly, in the future, their martial skills would only be second or third rate at best. It would be incredibly difficult for them to enter the ranks of first-rate experts. In the long run, Bixia sect might meet its end in the hands of Fan Yuanbai and his ilk. Shunchao could understand the pains she was undertaking. In my view, sect leader Zhao, you're still young. You need not worry so much. Perhaps given 2 or 3 years, you'll be able to recruit some good disciples. Zhao Chiying gave a strained smile. I can only continue with those thoughts in mind. Shunchao wanted to say more, but then a spoonful of soup entered his field of vision, accompanied by a tender voice. Open your mouth. At Shunchao's stare, Yan Wushi smiled slightly. Don't forget that you still owe me, he said, his tone firm yet unruffled. Is drinking this spoonful of soup criminal or inhumane? Or does it betray righteousness? All right. So that concludes the reading of chapters 90 through 93. I am so sorry for all the little giggles and stuff that I left in there, especially naming the previous chapter or whatever. I just didn't feel like getting rid of them. Yan Wushi is just so funny to me. He's so mischievous. I love it so much. Like, the man is comical, and I feel like I want to be his friend. Anyway, so I'm not giggling through the end of this thing either. I wanted to share something with you guys really quickly for those who are staying, and that is something that Zhao Chiying said to Shan Chao when she was basically like, speak of Cao Cao and he will arrive. So that is the way that they say speak of the devil and he will appear, but I wanted to tell you guys how to say it in Mandarin in case you wanted to know. So I'm going to say it once, then I'll slow it down, and then I'll say it again. You can say it with me. Yay, little Mandarin lesson. So it's 说曹操,曹操到. So the first word is 说. Just try to like match my tone. 说曹操曹操到. So 说曹操曹操到. Speak of the devil will appear. Okay. You guys, I'm a little giddy right now. I need to go. If you actually enjoyed that little lesson, I can go more in depth with it. If you guys want more lessons in the future of name pronunciations or little sayings here and there that happen to come up, just let me know, and I do not mind doing a little video on it for you guys. Anyway, I'll see you all next time, and 我爱你们.